Greetings, everybody. How you doing today? It's Joe Driscoll back with the Salt City Grind. Hope everybody's feeling all right. My guest tonight is John Maas. How you doing today, John?
I'm doing all right, man. It's good to see you. It feels weird seeing you like this. I feel like we run into each other on the streets of downtown Syracuse about once a week or so. And I think the last time I saw you, we were grabbing lunch at Original Grain. So yes. I'm doing well, but hopefully we get back to a place like that soon.
Yeah, I know. It's funny that I should see you today because I was actually contemplating running down to Original Grain today. I was like, I've been really good, man. I've been taking the crisis serious. Me and my wife, we cook rice and beans, and we keep our heads down, But today I was fiending for a little Original Grain, but I didn't give in to the urge.
Yeah, well, someday soon maybe we can grab a kale bowl soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So. You are the Central New York rep for Letitia James, the New York State's Attorney General. First of all, tell us a little bit about, how your background, where you were born and raised. Yeah. Why did you decide to settle in Syracuse, and how'd you end up at this position?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm not a Syracuse native. I was born and raised in Rochester, New York. Went to McQuaid Jesuit in Rochester. McQuaid Jesuit brought me to Syracuse. I went to Lemoyne College, continued my 4 years of Jesuit education there. Just really fell in love with Central New York and how similar it was to a lot of the things that I loved about Rochester, but also brought a lot of different flavors too that I was really interested in exploring and learning a little bit more about. So I actually was a political science major with designs and plans to go to law school. It's funny, I didn't really I was interested in politics along the way, but it was sort of secondary to some of my other interests. I was a business major, I ended up changing again. So I kind of landed on political science, but again, just as an avenue and a vehicle to get me into law school, because that's what everyone seems to do, is you either history, political science, and you go to law school. So about 6 months from graduation, a lot of my friends and buddies are studying for the LSAT. And I'm thinking, I'm a little burnt out from school. My senior year, I was having probably a little too much fun. And I said, okay, well, let me look for a job that can allow me to reset a little bit. Ideally, like in a legal setting, and can get my feet wet, get some experience under my belt, maybe chip away at a loan or two, and then pick up the books back again and go back to school. So I honestly was just applying to everything I could get my hands on. I was applying to, things in Rochester, Boston, New York City. I quite honestly was not focused or even willing to live and work in Syracuse. It just wasn't a thing for me. It never really was. Like, I liked going to college here. I had a lot of friends from here. So there was a posting, I was 20 years old, posting for a job as an executive assistant at the New York City Attorney General's office. So like, cool, executive assistant, New York Attorney General. I don't know what the New York Attorney General is, but it's attorney, and I want to go to law school, so that sounds good. So I applied for it. I interviewed for it. It's based here in Syracuse. It's working for a guy named Marty Mack, who's a former mayor of Cortland. And he's in charge of, at the time, was in charge of 13 regional offices, Buffalo up to Watertown and down to Suffolk on Long Island. So I interviewed for him. I thought the interview went really well. He was really interested in my Lemoyne background. I really was appreciative of what Lemoyne meant to the community. And we definitely checked a lot of the same boxes for interest along those lines. And I was really excited for it. It gave me everything I wanted. Working in an attorney's office, plan to stay for 1 year, then can maybe go to SU or go somewhere else. It is in Syracuse, but I'll deal with it. So I end up not getting the job. And I was really bummed out. And I was like, oh, no. So now what do I do? So I ended up defying my will and getting back in my minivan at the time and driving back to my parents' house. And no joke, I barely unpacked. I left everything in my parents' living room for a week. I went back to my old landscaping job that I had in college, and I was just kind of really bummed out. And, life has a funny way of making the stuff work, right? So I go back on my first day of landscaping. I'm like, this sucks. I have a college degree, got nothing to show for. I'm working landscaping, the same job I had the summer before. And the candidate that they had chosen to work at the AG's office just bailed at the last second. Wow. So I get a panic call from Marty Mack saying, hey, if you're still interested, the job is yours. You have an offer, but you got to get here tomorrow. And I was like, I'm in Rochester. And he's like, well, the job is yours. So I thank God for my parents. We had a whole setup going. I was able to fax all my forms over to HR that day, hopped in the car the next morning, commuted for a couple of weeks from Rochester to Syracuse to start this gig. Ended up moving to Syracuse, but not having an apartment, living on a futon for a couple months, finally got an apartment. And so once I finally got settled, I was like, okay, now I can actually focus on, getting my ducks in a row to go back to law school. This is starting to work out. I'm not too thrilled about being in Syracuse, but at that point I had a girlfriend that I was seeing, who is now my wife, who is from Syracuse and living in Syracuse. So that was certainly an added bonus. And, start really thinking about going to law school. And then I start looking at the AG's job, and I'm getting a little bit more insurance with the AG. And 1 year becomes 2 years, 2 years becomes 3 years. I'm really enjoying the work that I'm doing with Marty, learning about the office, learning about all the different levers that the AG's office has to help people. And I kind of did an internal audit of myself. And I said, why do I want to be a lawyer? Like, what do I want to do with law? Like, what's the end goal of law? Right. And ultimately I learned that it's to help people, and I'm mission oriented, and I always was back in high school and college. My parents raised me to do that way and seek value in others and make sure you're working towards that. And I kind of had this come to moment where, this job that I thought was just going to be a landing spot to get my feet wet in a law office is actually really helping me achieve what I'm hoping to achieve in my young career. So it was supposed to be a 6 month to 1 year landing spot. It ended up working out to be about 5 years. Worked for Marty, still my number one mentor and an incredible advocate and everything I look for in a public servant. And then I got an offer that I at the time couldn't refuse, to go back to Lemoyne and work in development and alumni and advancement. And at the time, I told Marty when I put my notice in, there's only one place in the world right now that would pull me away from the AG's office, and it's my alma mater. So I went and worked in advancement, which was great for me. I'm an extrovert, and I knew the place inside and out. I loved the people and loved the mission and the institution. And I really, really just loved that job. Got to work on my relationship building skills. And then 2016 happened. And, I'm not sure if you remember 2016 at this point. It feels like 30 years ago, but there was a big shift in the national landscape, if you remember correctly. And, it really kind of got me engaged again in political scene and really paying attention to things that mattered. And I was picking up, here and there along the way, not so much local politics, but certainly what was happening on the national level. And I'm sure you can attest to this too. There's just something inside of you that's like, I sit here every night and every morning and I read about these things, and I just read it and I digest it and then I move on. Like you hit a certain point where you want to just stand up and do something about it.
Yeah.
And so, I got more and more into it, and really serendipitously, an opening popped back up at the AG's office. There were some massive shoes to fill. I think who I was going to replace. But this role opened up, and a former colleague of mine that I had gotten to know the first time around reached out to me and he said, hey, I don't know what you're up to, or if you even have any interest in this. But we do have an opening, we're kind of scaling up a little bit. Would you be interested in coming back? And, I really didn't have the relationships that I quite honestly needed for this role at the time. I had relationships within the AG's office. I had relationships via Lemoyne and doors that was able to open for me. But I didn't have the right community building initiatives, the right advocates to talk to, the right elected officials to talk to. But I've always been really confident that I can quickly build up. And so I interviewed, and thankfully I got an offer. And again, I had to go to Lemoyne and say, listen, I did this 2 years ago, but there's one place that I would leave this place for, and it's to go back to the AG's office. And I've been there. It was my 2-year anniversary in March, and I'm having so much fun. I mean, it's just the mission is right, and it checked every single box for a place that I look for. So then I've been here, and I've only been, I hit the ground running. I got to meet people like you, and I'm trying to do it the right way. So that's how I got into this seat.
Awesome, man. It's a great story. So tell us, like, the what exactly, I think a lot of people, we could spend a lot of the episode just talking about what the AG's office does. I think a lot of people don't know, what roles the Attorney General has and how broad the scope is of the different battles you're fighting on so many different fronts. So give us some kind of broad strokes on all the different types of things that the Attorney General does.
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, the AG is every single state agency's judicial responsibility, every single agency's lawyer. So you think about New York State Department of Transportation, New York State Department of Health, New York State docs, all the hospital systems. At the end of the day, I'd say about 80 to 85% of the lawyers on staff are going to court every single day defending the state of New York. We are a New York lawyer. We're actually, by definition, the second biggest law firm in the country. The California AG's office is technically the biggest law firm. New York is the second biggest law firm. So you think about all of that litigation going on every single day, defense, proactive. Outside of that, so that's one giant component that we handle, and that's kind of the behind the scenes stuff. Primarily, we're fighting on behalf of New Yorkers in a bunch of different mediums every single day too. We are bringing actions against the federal government on New York's behalf and on joint coalitions with other states' behalf. We are mitigating disputes between landlords and tenants and fighting for tenants' rights. And I know our work is intertwined there a few different times.
Yeah.
We mediate consumer complaints against businesses all the time, and we try to make sure that and we can a little bit we'll unpack what COVID has brought on us and all the new different scams and bad actors that we've uncovered since then. But we have a team, myself included, who is on the phone with consumers almost every single day. We are responding to other elected officials and issues that they're seeing, they're bringing to our attention because we act as their legal counsel in that manner as well. We have so many different lemon law complaints. So we monitor, if you buy a lemon car, we help mediate those. Really every consumer issue you can think of, we're usually on, or we can help. The only thing we're not, and this always pains me to say, is we're unfortunately can't give out legal advice, and we don't act on like your behalf as your lawyer. And so a lot of calls that we get are from constituents who are asking legal advice. How should I handle this? Or, my neighbor's property is adjoint to mine, and I think it's a little too far. How should I handle that? Unfortunately, we just have to say you have to call your private attorney more so than not. But we usually have, if we can't help you, we can usually direct you to where you need to go. Just this week, I was staffing our election hotline. We monitor fraudulent elections complaints. We monitor all of that activity. Charities, we regulate every single charity and not-for-profit in New York State. Every single disillusionment, every single real estate sale for a not-for-profit comes through the AG's office. And so, it's pretty crazy the things that our fingers are on a daily basis. But the broadest stroke I can paint is that if you feel you're being defrauded in any manner, whether it is at Macy's, your private attorney, your landlord, please just bring it to the AG's office, because if we can't directly help you, we are 1 degree of separation away from someone who can. Right. And we try to advocate for that as much as we can.
Yeah, well, we'll maybe in the afterwards I can put up some contact info if you want.
Yeah,
I'm sure people can, if people are watching and they want to reach out to the AG's office, they just Google search.
And so here in Syracuse, we have a Syracuse regional office. We have 13 around the state, and as the person who used to work for the man who managed them, that to me is the best way to get in, is go to your nearest regional office. If it's a broader issue, you bring it to us, we can get it to where it needs to go. We also have just New York State hotlines as well. Like for an election hotline, for example, that was just a main hotline that we were all manning.
Yeah. So you worked for the previous Attorney General, and now you're working for Letitia James, the new Attorney General. What would you say is different in her priorities? What is what areas have been more forefront since she's taken the helm, and how do you think things have changed from the past to the present.
Sure. So I'm fortunate enough to say I'm 30 years old. I've worked for 3 attorney generals in about 6 years, because Barbara Underwood was also in between the previous attorney general and Tish James. Tish came from the New York City Public Advocate's office, and
Yep.
Of any, I've only worked for 3 elected officials, but she's extremely genuine. She cares. The initiatives that we take forward, one that immediately comes to mind that we just grabbed as soon as she came into the office is defending the census. And so for a little bit of background, we represented the coalition of New York State Attorney Generals to defend the census in the Supreme Court. The federal government wanted to insert a citizenship question onto the census for reasons that our office wasn't quite sure. We successfully were able to get that removed. And so, I think about the impact that has. We wanted to make sure every single New Yorker was accurately counted. The census means more funding. It means accurate representation in Congress and the federal level. It means so much for the next 10 years that we wanted to make sure that New York was getting its fair shake on the grand scale. And, I think about that as an analogy for how I think Tish James approaches being Attorney General. And that's making sure every single voice is heard and every single voice matters. She fought at the Supreme Court level to make sure that question was removed, because it was going to drastically undercut New York State. And she wanted to make sure that every single person was accounted for. And that's not to diminish any other previous administration by any means, but I truly believe that she thinks that way with whatever battle she takes on. And so that's kind of helped shape my approach to initiatives. And it's also, I really just think it's a really good analogy going forward with how we take on certain things.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and have you guys, how are you involved at all with any other aspects of the census? Like for us from the city side, we're just so worried that I think, and we're seeing similar numbers in Rochester and Buffalo, that COVID, traditionally a lot of the census numbers that we catch are through hand-to-hand interactions, going on knocking people's doors, going to events and stuff. And obviously all of that's been taken out of the equation.
Yep.
You guys involved on that side of it at all, or is it mostly just defending the legality and the questioning that's coming in?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been in pretty consistent contact with Tori Russo. Right before all this happened, we were actually hoping to get a joint census type rally together where the AG could partner with the city and the county to make sure awareness was out there for us. Obviously, COVID has grounded a lot of those types of things. But any sort of outreach that you're aware of, or that anyone listening is aware of, that you think tagging the AG's name onto, or that I can help get out there, we're certainly willing to help promote.
Nice.
Because we truly believe in it. And, we fought so hard to make sure that every New Yorker is accurately counted. Now we want to make sure that they actually answer it.
Yeah. So I've directed a few constituents throughout the COVID thing your guys' way. Usually stuff that's of like a sensitive nature, and people who are sometimes hired by large employers that they want to report on and
Yep.
deal with. That's one of the things that people can do. That they should be aware. Like you said, any fraud that people see, reach out. Tell us some of the the bigger people you guys are going to bat against. Some of the people that the AG is facing off against, and some of the bigger battles that you're fighting.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we had a pretty contentious Supreme Court argument. That was not the only one that we've had in Washington since this AG has been in. At one point, it was 22 lawsuits with the federal government. That was a long time ago. Not sure what the actual number is right now, but it was a lot of them. Just most recently with after the George Floyd unrest and protests and rallies that followed subsequently. Last week, the AG held what was supposed to be a one-day hearing to allow protesters, elected officials, community advocates, community leaders, anyone really that wanted to offer testimony regarding mistreatment during what was supposed to be peaceful protest. And like I said, it was supposed to be about one day. My team in New York City, my colleagues and my boss, our chief of staff, they were just remarkable with getting well over 100 people to this hearing to testify. They built this platform for folks to really speak and talk about what they saw, whether it was one night or throughout the weeks in which they were marching the streets. And the AG certainly is proud and protects the right to a peaceful protest. And if those rights were infringed upon, it's her duty to explore that and hear from folks. So like I said, what was supposed to be one day turned into 3.5 days of testimony, which culminated in her taking testimony from the NYPD commissioner. And so, I think that not to bulk any one bad actor together or anyone that she's taken on together, but really she's going to take on anyone that infringes on your rights. And she wanted to hear, and the AG's office wanted to hear from those that might have been involved with that taking place. Now, I don't want to prejudge any sort of findings with that investigation, but that's just one example of ways in which the AG's office is looking to protect rights.
So, of the 100 people who spoke, were most of them protesters, activists, people who were out there in the streets right now? Is that what the bulk of it was?
Yeah, there were a lot of protesters and activists. There were also elected officials, and some were out there. Some were just speaking on behalf. But yeah, really anyone in New York State was invited to submit testimony. They took testimony from 2 witnesses from Buffalo, for example. So it was a way to hear from folks who felt like their rights were infringed upon and impacted. It was jointly with the governor looking into practices and patterns of practices during what should have been peaceful protests.
Yeah. So can you tell us about the Donald? What has AG James' relationship been like with Trump? We had a lot of legal challenges here with his tax returns. I believe a lot of that contributed to him becoming a Florida resident and all his skirmishes around here. What has her interactions been with Trump personally beyond the lawsuits with the federal government? Have there been instances with Donald?
That I can't speak to. Like I said, I kind of, for better or worse, like being up in Syracuse for a lot of that. But like I said, we just were with a bunch of other state AGs brought a successful lawsuit against DACA, uplifting DACA and solidifying DACA. So, I think, like I said, I can't speak to what the personal side is by any means.
Right.
I like where I am.
Individual cases aren't for public discussion at this time.
Right. Yep. Yeah. As far as I know.
Okay. So one of the other things that we've seen throughout this COVID situation is, people utilizing this crisis. It was crazy. I was watching Ozarks. I don't know if you watched that one on Netflix. Yeah. It's a brilliant show, but in season 3, in politics, you never let a good crisis go to waste. I think a lot of people are definitely utilizing this crisis to their own advantage, in a lot of horrible ways that we've seen. And, I thought it was kind of crazy. Right as this crisis was rolling in, I heard that line, and it's come into my head a million times since then. So you guys are at the front line of a lot of people trying to pull off scams and grifting people and people pulling off shiesty behavior. Maybe talk to us about some of the scams that are out there that you guys have come across and you've been battling.
Yeah, man, it is. It never ceases to amaze me what people come up with, especially to prey on the most vulnerable that we have. It's just this week, just today. We've been working on a scam that's targeting a lot of public sector employees, especially ones that we've noticed are near retirement. I think 120 Syracuse City School District employees were targeted. There was an article in Syracuse.com about that a couple of days ago. What they're doing is they're getting a letter in the mail that Looks like it's from New York State Department of Labor, and is basically like, hey, and it's got a key card in it, a key bank credit card in it. And it says, hey, call this number to access your unemployment claim. And everyone who's getting it hasn't filed for unemployment. They actually are employed, so they shouldn't be filing for unemployment. And so you call Department of Labor, and in order to get through the Department of Labor, you need a PIN code, of which these folks do not have. So they've been calling our office because it's notably a scam. And and I can if you want to share this too, Department of Labor did come out with a link that you can file a report on.
Okay.
And we've got clear instructions, and we sent a press release. I can forward it to you after this too. We sent a press release kind of laying out instructions for folks to properly follow. But I talked to my colleague out in Buffalo today. They've gotten like 100 calls just today on this. So it's statewide, and it's really sophisticated, which is the scariest one because it's going to, like I said, our most vulnerable, our public sector colleagues, and they're, hopefully calling us, but it pains me to think about how many aren't calling us and how many are going through with it and turning over information they shouldn't. I also would want to flag that if you are retired or near retirement and you do get that letter in the mail, you should flag it for your retirement system, whoever, if it's New York State retirement system or if it's another public sector retirement system, because we think that maybe this might be a way that they're trying to route into your retirement fund. By getting your information and then pretending you're a person and stealing your identity that way. So if you call, for example, New York State Department or New York State Retirement System, they'll put a little alert in your account, and that way they'll add some security levels to it, just a way to help protect yourself. But that's just one that popped up this week. I mean, when this thing started, there were testing kit scams that we were hearing from, like where people were, nobody could get a test when this all started, right? This was all like there were people who were sending fake tests to people, fake COVID tests. There was some fake cure pills out there that were brought to our attention. PPE scams where they promised certain protections via PPE that weren't real. This mask can protect you from COVID. It was so early in the process, but you can't accurately say that.
Did you guys have any ones with PPE? Like a lot of the stuff that we encountered with PPE from the council side was people promising delivery and then not coming through on it. Did you guys have any of those where people had promised to deliver and then were not really coming through on the orders?
Not to my knowledge, but if you want, after this, we can talk offline because I would imagine our consumer fraud folks or possibly even our taxpayer protection folks would be interested in that because, that is, municipality money and funds that's going to something that's not being delivered on. Like we might be able to be helpful to you on that.
Yeah. Oh no, we didn't experience it, but we were encountering a lot of agencies. Like I talked to the folks at Center State and they were saying that, a lot of folks were ordering. We did get a lot of emails, offering these, because I was saying to myself, as all this PPE info was coming in, I was going, wait, these things are really hard to get. How is this?
Yeah.
Can I order 10,000 of them right now? And, eventually I called some of the Center State folks and they were saying that what people were doing was just sending it out and then it might come 3 months later or whatever it is, a promised few day delivery and then, they'll eventually send it, but when will it be? So I don't know if you guys had encountered any of that. Not really.
Yeah, that's not to my knowledge, but again, it wouldn't shock me if we did elsewhere in the state. I'm just trying to think back. This all seems like a blur of how far back it is, but like I mentioned, the fake here is a fake. And then also, this was an opportunity for some of the the classic scams. Like we talk about the grandparent scam a lot, right? We just heard reports that those scams have actually really ratcheted up because everyone's home and everyone's by their phone. And so scammers are calling a lot more knowing that they're probably going to be likelier to get through. And so, we say all the time, like even pre-COVID, we would say, if you answer the phone, do not give any information out. Like no one needs your social security number. They just don't. Don't put it online. Don't give it to anyone over the phone unless it's a really, really a trusted source. Be very careful with your bank information. and we get the scary ones a lot, which is mimicking grandchildren and saying that they need money fast, or that they're in a car in the ditch, and we just hear these horror stories. And so, unfortunately, one of the really big downsides to not only this job, but just these types of crises are you really do see some of the worst in people. And so just really be cautious and really be proactive in protecting yourself and your identity.
Yeah. So you said there was 13 offices
Yep.
That's across the state or in the region?
That's across the state. And then that's not including our Albany office and our New York City office, which is, a lot of our team is headquartered in New York City. So I'll name them real quick for you, but there's Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Watertown, Plattsburgh, and then Utica, Binghamton, Poughkeepsie, Westchester, Brooklyn, Harlem, Nassau, and Suffolk. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have that previous job, I don't think. But I'm leaning a little bit on that gig. But so we've got bases all there. I cover myself about 18 counties. So I also cover the Watertown regional office, the Utica regional office, and the Binghamton regional office.
Wow. So how many people? So this is something that as we were talking, I was really curious about, because we have such a hard time at the city level keeping up with stuff like City Line. When you just have that flood of question, of complaint calls coming in. How many staff do you guys have in the Syracuse office, and are you guys able? I mean, do you have troubles with capacity with the amount of the flood of, and especially like with unemployment, we saw a, 3,000-fold increase in problems with unemployment. Did you guys see a surge when COVID happened and all the concerns that people have?
Yeah, we did. And what added insult to injury a little bit is we were also telecommuting as well. We were really quick to kind of shut down. And I was busier than ever when I was telecommuting. It's just kind of like a rush when everything, there was no idea of what normal felt like anymore. So in Syracuse, all together, we probably, between attorney support staff and others, investigators, we probably have between 45 and 50 employees. In terms of being able to help with consumer intake, we do a pretty good job. We have a full-time consumer frauds rep. We have a full-time attorney who's dedicated to consumer fraud and affirmative work. We have a few investigators and support staff who help us out when needed. So we take walk-ins. Our office did just recently move. So we're at 300 South State Street now. We used to be on 615 Erie Boulevard West. A lot of people still go there. So we did move. We're in a lot more, we're more in the heart of the city, in my opinion, now, which I really like. We're close to the courts, which our attorneys really like. But we do take walk-ins. We have a de jure attorney who is willing to sit down with you and walk through steps every single day. And our consumer fraud folks are willing to help too. Now, obviously, COVID really kind of hampers a lot of that. I'm not even quite sure what the walk-in policy is going to be until we're a little bit back to normal. But in normal times, that's the case. But again, we're manning our phones as well. Anyone who needs to get in touch with us can get in touch with us.
Yeah. What is a typical work week look like for you guys? Like, what is what would you say, for us, like, as counselors, some of those constituent type calls are the real meat and potatoes of like what we see the most. Yeah. What type of stuff are you guys dealing with week to week?
Sure. We, like anyone, I think we keep a different set of longer term projects and short immediate projects. Before this happened, I was kind of out in the field representing the Attorney General whenever I could. I was helping staff her when she was in the regions. I agree with you where you never quite know where like a constituent call is going to go. Right. And yeah. So I've taken constituent calls where like, I think it's like a complaint that I'm probably going to either have to hand off to someone in a different office or like, we're not going to be able to help at all. And then turns out like 3 weeks later, that's turned into a statewide case. Right. I think back to when I was working at the AG's office the first time, there was a case that we ended up bringing against Macy's. It was like a gift card, a blind spot in their policy where like you weren't able to return something that was bought on a gift card. And we ended up like, whoever took the complaint, I'm sure was like, what? Like, that makes no sense. That ended up being like close to a $200,000 consumer case for the AG's office statewide, because they were able to look at all the different Macy's around the state. So you just never know what it's going to be. So yeah, I mean, I have complaints a lot of times, most times I should say, forwarded from elected officials like yourself, like, Magnarelli and Pam Hunter's office and Al Sturpey's office will take a constituent complaint and say, this sounds like an AG's office. They'll get it over to me. So that does set my daily priorities a lot of times. But again, we're also working on longer term projects that are regionally focused or statewide focused that are important to the office and important to New Yorkers. And we're just trying to make sure that we get to the goalposts on it.
Nice. So we did have one question from online about the legalization of marijuana. Does the AG have any takes on that? Any opinions?
It's a legislature issue. I can't really speak to where we are or where she is on it as an office. And like I said, it's one of those where we are the legal defender and proactor of the state, and that's a legislature issue as far as I know.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate it coming from that area.
Yeah. So maybe talk a little bit about a big thing in New York State politics, and especially for us in upstate is, I always make the analogy of when you're canvassing and you're campaigning as a politician, it's a much greater challenge to go to an area where, if you go into an urban core where you can hit, 40 houses in an hour, where the houses are very tightly spaced together, versus if you are, say, campaigning in Manlius, where it's a mile between each house. It's much easier. And I think we have that same kind of dynamic in New York State, where New York City is just, you've got, millions of people right on top of each other. And, how many Congress representatives and assembly representatives are all in that few miles of space versus, all of upstate. So it's always a challenge for upstate to, get a seat at the table and feel, feel like they're getting their share, that they're treated equally with downstate. So how do you guys in the AG's office deal with that, with Tish having to do so much with the city, and it's just natural because I think, so many of her constituents are down there. How does she find time to give upstate the equal love that it feels it needs,
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. As I mentioned earlier, she was a New York City public advocate. She is from Brooklyn and has just a tremendous amount of relationships within the city, and all for good and the right reasons. I mentioned I cover 18 counties. If you actually look at that on a map, all the way up to St. Lawrence County, all the way down to Tioga County, everything in between. It's just a huge corridor of the state. I speak with constituents out in Madison County all the time and hear about the issues that they're up against with rural healthcare and rural internet access. We're extremely mindful of those circumstances. I feel like it is my job to make sure that I am flagging it internally the right way and making sure that our executive team is aware of them, and they are amazing at it. We held a joint town hall with Congressman Anthony Brindisi and his constituents that spanned, from Utica to Binghamton. We were getting questions from Cortlandville. We were getting questions. I've seen most of New York State, pretty much everything New York State had to offer. I grew up in Rochester. My grandparents and my mom are from Addison, New York, just south of Corning. So pretty much the entire Southern Theater in Central New York, I've seen it all. And I was getting questions from towns and villages I had never heard of. And so, and the AG was just great with the constituents and inherently understood every single issue. And even in COVID times, we've been responding to labor issues that we're hearing from not only people downstate, but from, the farm issues up in Oswego and in Madison County where there were hot spots. We were fielding complaints from constituents all over the state. And so, I definitely agree with you that it feels that way sometimes, but I can confidently say from an AG perspective, our footprint spans from Buffalo to the border and all the way across.
Yeah, and when you talk about some of those COVID things, like, I think, I had some people who were, maybe you could get into some of those ones around COVID, like, employers not using PPE in those situations. Have you guys gotten calls like that, like stuff about, COVID specific, or people being
Yeah.
forced to work in environments that they don't feel safe? Is that something the AG's office touches?
It does, yeah. So we have a labor bureau, an absolutely fantastic labor bureau who, when this really hit, we opened up a hotline, and we're taking complaints from employees who don't feel like their protections are being met from a health standard or wherever they work, COVID related. And so I can share that information with you too. We're still taking them. Our hotline is still up and running. But yeah, and I had the stat for you. We've taken thousands of calls and are trying to help all New Yorkers if they don't feel safe in the workplace.
Good. So another thing you guys handle is kind of white collar crime, right? Like some of that,
Yeah.
that higher end stuff. Like how have you found how does that come to you? Do you guys, is that from, like you were saying, sometimes you get constituent complaints that don't ferment for months afterwards? Is that kind of thing? How does some of the white collar crime end up in the AG's office?
Yeah, that's a great question and probably way above my pay grade. But we, like I said, we are headquartered down in the city, so we're a pretty close proximity to Wall Street. But my guess is that we have an incredibly talented staff across all those levels. They probably, similar to how a consumer case would unfold, get complaints in that same manner. Follow the news. I'm not sure what their process looks like, to be completely honest with you. I just know they're remarkable, and they deliver remarkable results for New Yorkers.
Yeah. And do you know of any larger, like, white collar stuff that's come through that's been newsworthy stuff?
I'd have to go back and look. Honestly, everything, especially up here, has just been so COVID focused.
Yeah.
But I know we've had some really big wins as an office. So I'll go back and I'll look for you, and maybe that's something you can share for me too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, is there anything else you want to relay about the work you guys are doing? Any other topics that we missed that you're thinking of?
So one thing, and I should have mentioned this when I was talking about PPE, but we also, when this really hit, the AG and some staff down in New York City really took it upon themselves to distribute a ton of PPE within the city. I mean, and across the state. Now, I don't think that's become such a pressing issue anymore. It sounds like everyone has the right access to that. But at one point, we had to distribute like 22,000 gloves, like thousands and thousands of masks. And so we, and it kind of speaks back to your earlier question about, who is Tish James as an attorney general. I think that also speaks to who she is too, which is on a very granular level, even though it's not in the attorney general's purview to do something like this, she was distributing PPE to those who needed it. So I should have mentioned that in the PPE scams, but it's just another way in which we were trying to help.
That's awesome. And can you talk about like her, Tisha James's path to office, kind of, from public advocate to AG, the distinction between the two, and how she transitioned?
Sure. So again, my New York City politics and mindset isn't great since I sit up here, but she was a New York City public advocate, second ever, I believe. And there is a ton of crossover between the public advocate's office and the AG's office, especially when it comes to outreach and consumer focus, and holding those accountable that need to be held accountable. So she really, in terms of New York State job training, she probably had as close as you could get to that role. Before that, she served on the New York City Council, and actually back before that, she was the head of the Brooklyn regional office at the AG's office. So she understands the office. She understands the mechanisms in which we can help protect New Yorkers at every level and every geographic location. So like I said, she, the training that she got in the PA's office only equipped her to be a phenomenal attorney general.
Nice. So fun round before we go. I'll ask you a few favorites. Favorite book?
Oh man, Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. Really anything by Malcolm Gladwell, but Blink is the best one that I've read.
Have you checked his podcast at all?
Oh, it's revisionist history is usually I'll listen to it and then I'll sit and stare blankly for like 20 minutes and just think about everything that I just listened to. I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, have you done Broken Record too?
What is that? I don't even know what that is.
He did another one with what's his name, Rick Rubin, and they
That's right. Okay.
They go through records and stuff. It's pretty cool. Go through the history.
All right, I gotta check that out.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I think he's producing on that. Rick Rubin takes most of the driver's seat on that. Favorite movie?
Oh, that's a great question.
It doesn't be one singular all time. You can just throw one out there.
I got two, and there's two different categories that mean two different things to me. I'm a huge comedy fan. So Wedding Crashers is always going to be my favorite comedy of all time.
Nice.
I've in the past like 3 years, I think I've been to 20 weddings, and so it's really hit home. And then my favorite non-comedy is Shawshank Redemption, which I've been thinking about a lot recently, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And it's just one of my all-time favorites.
Nice. Currently watching Netflix. Any good shows?
So I actually just finished, not on Netflix, but I just finished The Sopranos. I never really sat down and watched it. I watched it from a distance in college. Yeah, like I'd catch an episode here and there, but I actually sat down and I watched it, and it's just phenomenal. Everything about it. Right now on Netflix, I got to be honest with you, my wife and I are just, like I mentioned earlier, we're huge comedy fans. So I rewatched. I think I'm on my 11th time rewatching The Office, and we're rewatching Parks and Rec right now, which is another favorite of mine.
Yeah. That's actually in the hopper right now. I just came from this episode before we started.
Perfect.
And then let's talk SU. Favorite Cuse basketball players?
Again, I've got two, maybe three. So Jerry McNamara will always just be my favorite. Like that era to me was from him and Melo as a freshman all the way to like when he carried us to the ACC or the Big East championship title senior year and went off against West Virginia. Like that whole era to me is so key. And then I'm also a humongous Hakeem Warwick fan. We'll just that whole I get so happy when I think about those teams. And then a soft spot for Deion Waiters. I loved watching him. I loved how carefree he was. That guy just doesn't care. Like he will shoot when everyone in the world knows he shouldn't take that shot. He doesn't care, man, and he's launching it up. So yeah, I'm excited, man. I hope we get it this year. I'm excited for this team. I'm excited for the program's going.
Yeah, I just hope we can get out there sometime soon, man. I'm really just hoping that we get some kind of vaccine or something together soon, man. It's a hard time especially for sports fans, man. I don't know how I'll deal through winter without Cuse basketball if we can't watch games.
You're telling me if I don't get the Bills, which I know you're a Bills fan too, if I don't get the Bills and Cuse basketball, that might be it. That might be it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of my Cuse basketball. The ones that come to mind right now, I'd probably say are obviously Melo and GMAC, of course, will always hold the top spots for that championship. But I think Benager was
nice
at a super sweet spot for, and then Wes Johnson as well, man. Just a real.
So you like those transfers?
Yeah. They just both have that kind of quiet, shy guy, real nice kind of vibe, but.
Yeah, I like that, and I like we've had a lot of those kind of one-hit wonders. Like I think about like Andrew White and even Elijah Hughes to some extent, where they kind of come in, they make an instant impact, and then they're gone. But Boeheim has really kind of unearthed some gems that way. Yeah.
So, dude, thanks so much for coming on the show. Yeah. Anything you want to let people know before you go, like direct people to? So once again, like to clarify for folks who want to know, the AG's office tackles, like I think you said, anyone who feels that they've been defrauded by someone or anyone who feels that they've been taken advantage of, the AG's office is there, if not as the source of your champion in that fight, at least to direct you to resources. So yeah, anything you want to say along those lines, the stuff that people should know about the AG's office, where to go?
Yeah, so very generally, our website is ag.ny.gov. That can pretty much direct you anywhere you want to go. As I mentioned earlier in the show, I think the most effective way is to visit your nearest regional office. On that website, you can be directed there. I will send Joe over some information that he can post after this episode that I think will be pertinent for folks. But yeah, no, listen, man, I appreciate you doing this. Even though I'm not from Syracuse originally, it feels like my home now. And so I appreciate you bringing on all these guests, and I had a lot of fun doing it. I hope we can do it again.
Awesome, dude. Yeah, sorry I dipped out there for a second. I don't know what happened. My internet just dropped out for a minute. Marty Mashpole says we should have mentioned the Pearl.
Probably. Rest in peace. I wasn't able. I've only really seen highlights, but he seems awesome. He seems great. That's great. Well, what's going on, Marty?
Thanks so much, brother. Thanks for coming on, man. Thanks for all the work you're doing around town, brother.
Anytime. Same to you, and stay safe out there.
All right, Original Grain when this is over.
All right, buddy.
Bye.